Broadcasting from occupied territories or the flea media, it's the Reality Dysfunction Podcast, a space where a diverse group of brown folk from across the nation explore the political experiences and social future of our Chicano Latino community. Control the narrative. Resist the dysfunction.
Before we get into the dysfunctional reminiscences of the crew in this segment, I wanted to take a moment and talk about Jesus Chuy Negrete. I met Chuy Negrete in 1992 at the Chingon Reunion, a conference that was organized in Lansing, Michigan by the Midwest Hispanic Institute on Substance Abuse. He was amazing. What a dedicated revolutionary performer. I was enthralled by his stories and by his presence. I saw Chuy on and off for the next decade, performing, speaking, educating. When he would come to Michigan State, we always had a big party with Chuy. Laughing and singing, he would bring news of other campuses and the struggles of MECHA students around the country. Later in the 1990s, when a bunch of us were organizing with the United Farm Workers out of the Xicano Development Center in Southwest Detroit, Chuy would come and do community concerts at our building. It was amazing, and it was such a benefit to our organizing. Chuy Negrete was one of a kind, and we shall not see his like again.
Perform, and then all of a sudden we're at, I think it was Apache's house, and we're all just listening to him sing, live and in person, and it was very personal, and it really blew me away, because you really have to go out and find your own history, especially during our time. It's gotten progressively better, as people have gotten their PhDs, like somebody I know here, and a lot more educational materials have come out, when it comes to our culture and our history. But, what he was doing was so unique and so revolutionary, even during that time, that, I don't know, it's hard to put into words the impact that he had. It was just an immense impact. And to have had that personal connection and meet and talk to him, it was a pretty significant moment in my life. I always, when you posted about it, like I had said, it's some of the best times in my life, because it was just such a great experience.
Yeah.
How long before that had you known him? Before I went to Michigan State,
I met. Well, for those of you who are joining us and who are listening, we're having a conversation about Jesus Chuy Negrete, the Xicano. Woody Guthrie. The man. I'm sure that a lot of you who listen to this podcast have heard Chuy perform at some point in your life. He passed away just recently, and we thought that we would share some of his music and talk about not just Chuy, but also the role of the cultural worker in the Chicano movement and the Chicano Latino movement. I met Chuy at the Chingon reunion in Lansing, Michigan, where he came and he played. That was also it was put on by this guy named Willie. It was Guillermo Velasquez. We used to call him Chuco because he had a little place he called the Chuco shop, and he sold hats and like Stacey Adams and stuff like that. It was kind of cool. It was kind of ghetto too, but it was kind of cool that there was a place called the Chuco shop. And so but he opened up this place that he called the Midwest Hispanic Institute on alcohol and drug treatment or something like that. Reiner and I were there a lot, and we helped him get the building ready and all this other kind of stuff. And then they had the Chingon reunion, and they brought Reyes Lopez Tijerina and a whole bunch of other people, man. And Chuy was there, and that was the first time that I saw him play. And I was just, blown away by what he was doing. Then I saw him at Michigan State. And then after, a couple of times, Chuy is one of those kinds of people that was eternally friendly. After the show at the school, he'd come back to the house, and we'd sit there and play guitars and do other things. And yeah, it was always a really good time. So a couple years before you got there, I had met him.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play a little bit of his tape right now.
Okay.
Passioning governance by the willing. Nan giti feo ni milana yi. Nekitu bilashido. Nekitu bilashido. Nesha shaya nanyali. Passioning governance by the willing. Nan giti feo ni milana yi. Nekitu bilashido. Nesha shaya nanyali. In the year 1521, on the last day that we were free, El Hutlocani, Cuauhtémoc, gave the following command to his people. Destroy your ball fields, your churches, your schools, your temples, your books of learning, and take everything that you hold sacred into the center of your heart. Passioning governance by the willing, nan kiti feo ni milana yi. Nekitu bilashido.
I know, like for me, that was the first time that I had ever heard anything like that, and it was crazy. It was exciting. It ignited my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same reaction to it. The only person I can compare him to would be like Danny Valdez, which hopefully people know who Danny Valdez is. His dad is Luis Valdez, who did he direct La Bamba? Anyways, he's a little bit more they're a little bit more well known, but Chuy's a little bit more revolutionary, I guess you would say. But yeah, I mean, when you would hear him sing, it would make you want to it gave you inspiration to research and to read more about what he was talking about. If you could find materials that covered it,
Yeah. I think it's also interesting too, like in terms, like I was talking about a second ago, in terms of like cultural workers, and to think about how that has really changed, over the last 40 years. And, even like when I was a kid, there were still people that was really doing teatro, but it doesn't really seem like there are a lot of teatro groups around anymore. I don't know, like I know my guy, Mark Piñate, down in Tucson at Borderlands Theater, he and his partner, Milta Ortiz, I mean, they are really holding it down in terms of producing, Chicano, Chicana, Latino, Latina specific content, and really thinking about how to use the theater in a way that promotes the culture, and not just the culture, but like the culture and like the philosophy, like the mental attitude of Chicanismo. It's intense, some of the work that they're doing down there.
They're doing a webinar on the teatro this Saturday. Jose Moreno posted the flyer for it. I just signed up for it. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because Danny and Luis Valdez were the ones who really promoted into the teatro with farm worker movement around the country. But for my own personal awakening, one of the things that I'll never forget is I was looking through some of my uncle's old stuff, and he had a script he had wrote for the MSU teatro, and it was about a farm worker and just kind of his daily life. And I remember, in one part of the script, he said, fuck all the owners, fuck all the heads, fuck all the bosses. And, and as I read it, I guess it gave me a different understanding of what farm workers went through, because you tend to, you don't tend to always hear the nitty gritty shit that they went through, about how so many farm workers died, the sugar beet workers here in Michigan, how some of them lost legs and hands, and you don't really hear about that aspect of it. And, it's an amazing history.
Yeah, I feel like, I hadn't heard of Chuy until you guys had said that he had passed. And so it's really cool hearing about this and having like a not necessarily a traditional education method to learn history, because I think music and theater and that kind of entertainment tends to be a lot more accessible to people than like, here's a book, read it. Yeah, it's really cool. I think the only thing, in my young pop culture mind that I can think of is In the Heights by Lin-Manuel Miranda. But even then, it's not revolutionary or thought-provoking in any way other than the typical gentrified immigrant story that is told about Latinos all the time.
I was gonna say, I think that this is really cool as well, and same boat as Carolina, not having known about Chuy until you guys, wanted to talk about him today. But the only thing that I can compare it to is I've been on this journey recently to learn more about what it is to be Chippewa Native and all of the arts that, and all of the culture that encompasses, and learning about just what many would consider radical indigeneity, and that's the only thing that I have to compare it to, and that's just something that I've been on this 2-month journey learning about and expanding.
I think it's interesting, Carolina, what you were just saying a second ago, because it seems so much like over the last 30 years or so that it's not really about the message. What it's about is the person, right? Because the person is Latino, or because the person is Mexican American, or that's what makes it radical, right? It's almost, in some ways, it's almost like we've gone backwards in representation, right? Because I think that we really believe that just because we have brown faces, in front of the cameras or behind the microphones, that, that itself is revolutionary. That itself is something to, be in awe of. And I think that, when we listen to, the kind of work that people like Chuy are doing or did, or even Valdemar Velasquez, down in Toledo, Ohio, the president of the Farm Worker Labor Committee, the work that he does through song and in organizing, right? That, I think it really helps us to, put that into perspective. I mean, just having brown faces itself is not radical, right? It's not revolutionary. I mean, because if we have brown faces and they're espousing white capitalism, I mean, there's nothing radical about that, Yeah,
so. I think we've had this conversation too in terms of politicians and stuff like that. It's very much of a performative activism just to have a brown face there, or even not just a brown face, or a Latinx face and stuff like that. I know people were I think that reminds me a lot of the conversation that was happening, or that is happening, around Eva Longoria's new show, Brownish. Mm-hmm. How it's you're telling this quote unquote brown story, but Latinx, Mexicans, Chicanos, they're not all brown, and we shouldn't label our identity as being brown because we're not a race, we're an ethnicity. And I think in conversations like that, we're missing things like Chuy's work, and like in that work that gives us more context of history, but also like putting into perspective of like, you know, the story that we've been told for the past how many years.
Yeah.
Of like Black brown narratives, of white brown narratives, you know, it really doesn't make sense. And we have to make breaking down those colonial like structures of ethnicity a part of the conversations that we have around Chicanos, Chicanoisms, and like Latinidad.
Yeah. In the Facebook post that I put up, this one gentleman who I do not know, but who knew Chuy, said that in 1979 that he and Chuy were at the International Youth Festival in Cuba, and that Fidel Castro himself asked Chuy to close out the meeting close out the festival by singing songs, which I think is pretty fucking cool. Regardless of how you feel about Fidel Castro, I think that's pretty badass. You know, the biography that got sent out reads that Jesus Chuy Negrete, 72, a Chicago-based folk singer. I think that's also another thing that's probably not to be overlooked, is that Chuy is based out of Chicago. He lived there most of his life, you know, with other people like Carlos Cortez and, you know, poets like Carlos Compián, Ana Castillo. I mean, there is a really interesting Midwest contingent, right, for the Chicano community, and it's one that I think is underappreciated and rarely ever talked about. But it says that
fuck California Chicanos. Like, they're so entitled and they don't oh my God, they get so mad because they're like, why aren't we included in things? But then exclude like basically any and all work that's happening with Chicanos in the Midwest. It's like, I mean, I could go on. We have talked about this before too, but like, it's just so frustrating because like you want to see work done with Chicanos, you want to see community built with Chicanos. Like, damn, get your ass out of California, get your ass out of the Southwest. Like,
yeah, well, that's definitely true. Get your ass out of the Southwest. Here, let's play a little bit more of this tape, or maybe not. Oh, wait a minute. Oh.
The place, the Texas-Mexican border. Bueno, pues ¿qué hubo? ¿Y cómo les va? Qué bueno día para cantar noticias. Ya han llegado del Nuevo México. Well, in 1814, we took a little trip down with Colonel Jackson through the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we fought the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. Fired our guns and the British came a-coming. Wasn't quite as many as there was a while ago. Fired our guns and they began a running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Mexico, hijo de la fregada. Revolution was the word. I fought and died with Jacinto Trevino, Tiburcio Vasquez. I rode with them, lived with them, died with them. The year was 1850. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo had been signed. By 1851, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo had been broken.
I mean, you know, watching him do this in person, you know, it's it's all of these different influences, right? Like this song, the song that he's singing. I mean, that's like this really famous Johnny Horton song, the Battle of New Orleans, and then he immediately switches into verses from Yo Soy Joaquin. I mean, it's just the scope, right, of the work. And I think, again, like when we start talking about like him being a cultural worker, and then what we also understand is that, Chicano Latino culture in the United States is really this conglomeration, right, of all of these different things, and so, I mean, it's just it's amazing to watch him sort of or to listen to him, transition through these different influences and bring them all back together, right, and say, hey, this is what it means to be Chicano in the United States.
And he did it all in that one part of the song.
Yeah.
I mean, not only did he that, but he's also, I mean, he's humorous guy. The way that he presented it, I mean, right now I was muted, but when I heard him do that kind of parody of the New Orleans song, I was laughing, because it's like, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And also educational and also entertaining.
Yeah, he was pretty funny. He was really funny, dude. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan. I was gonna say, I'm glad he mentioned the treaty because, I was going down a YouTube rabbit hole watching quick draws from movies, right, and stuff like that, like westerns, a lot of them, And so they had this clip of John Wayne, and John Wayne was basically trespassing on a land grant, and so the people who own the land or were working for the landowner who had the land grant were like, you're trespassing. Then it became a quick draw, and John Wayne shoots the guy who, one of the guys who's trying to protect the land grant, and he says to the other one, well, what about that? And then he says, like, I'm not the landowner, and rides off. But I mean, there's John Wayne basically saying fuck the treaty, so there's the history that was being presented in pop culture in the late 50s and early 60s.
Yeah.
Fuck John Wayne.
Yeah, fuck him.
The press release says that Negrete was born in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, was ferried across the Rio Grande with his family as a 1-year-old and spent his early years in Texas, where his parents were migrant farm workers. In later life, he was closely aligned with the farm worker movement, performing for Cesar Chavez's United Farm Workers and Valdemar Velasquez's Farm Labor Organizing Committee. At the age of 7, Negrete was reared in the steel mill culture of South Chicago. As a young adult, he worked with his father at U.S. Steel.
Wow, that's where my family came from in Mexico, San Luis Potosí, but they came to Texas to work in the coal mine.
Damn, dude, he might have been your cousin.
Yeah, it could be. That's crazy.
It's a small world.
Just talking about this kind of makes me like very upset that these are not the things that we learn in like school. I didn't learn about any of these things. I never even talked about Cesar Chavez in school until I was like in college, and that was very intentional because of the courses I was taking.
You know what, Cecilia, but that's what this time period was always meant to be. You heard Chuy sing about El Mandato de Cuauhtémoc. Cuauhtémoc was the one who gave us the prophecy of the sons, the fifth son, sixth son, seventh son. So in the fifth son, that's supposed to be war and conflict, which would have encompassed the 1960s, right? So we're in the sixth son, which is supposed to be a time of rebirth, of knowledge, of identity, of culture. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like we are in that time period. So don't feel bad. You were meant to discover this stuff now. I mean, I had parents that taught me a lot of this stuff, but when I, when I became an adult, I still had to seek out a lot of it, and take what you will, or believe, if you will, about prophecies. But I mean, it's something to think about, and I mean, hopefully, do you know what happens in the seventh son?
What happens?
No.
I remember hearing about this, but no, what happens, Dan?
Reclamation
Uh,
of our homeland.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the fifth and sixth sons have been accurately described, in my opinion. Hey,
I think Danny's right. I mean, I think the one thing to always keep in mind is that and people can try to spin this however they want to, but there is a history here that is purposely excluded, right? That is not taught, and that it's not an oversight, right? That Chicano or Latino history in the United States isn't taught. It's not an oversight. It's on purpose. Even as late as 2010, right? Going back to the Arizona struggle, where these guys freaking pass a law that makes it illegal to do that. I think that's super important.
Well, what do you mean 2010? Look at what was it in that they tried to pass in Texas?
Oh, just recently. Yeah. Or what's going on in California right now with the ethnic studies struggle. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and then of course the argument is the kids can experience it, but they can't learn about it.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it earlier too, where Cecilia was saying like, she went to a white school and shit. I went to a white school too, and so it's. I think it ties back. Yeah, what Ernesto was saying too is that like you want to have these conversations, you want to learn, you want to do the best for the next generation. And I think my parents did a good job of exposing me to a lot of like Chicano identity stuff growing up, but that still doesn't mean that everything.
Yeah.
I'm continuously frustrated, not just with the American public school system and the history, in the way that history is taught and what history is taught, but even like within like the college system. And I think part of it is misinformation just generally about what actually encompasses the Chicano movement. But having kind of like coming into UCSB, which is a Hispanic serving institution, quote unquote,
right.
But coming in and being exposed to like Californian like Latinos and Latinx people, and being really like, I don't want to say shunned, but kind of being like, oh, like why do you identify as Chicana? Like why is that something, why don't you just do Latinx? And there's a lot of negativity surrounding it. And I think it's taken this past year with doing the podcast and being at home and having these, college level conversations about race and identity with my parents, but also with my ninos. And what does that mean to finally I think come back to a place where I'm comfortable being like, okay, yeah, I'm Chicana and I want to learn more and I want to do more, but I'm also like, I'm not just gonna like when I was little, like I'm not just gonna be like, oh wow, this is so cool, but being critical of it and being like, okay, let me take these experiences that I had in college with, I think rightly so, criticisms of Chicano from like Chicanonist, but the Chicano movement with, first generation like immigrants, but also first generation college students, in their feelings of exclusivity within like the space, and kind of shape that into how I look into it. But it is like, it's not just it's not just like the California or the American public school system. It is Latinx people within the United States that hold those negativities towards it. And so people who, and I think especially here in California, where there is a very stark difference between people who identify as Chicanos and who are not, like who identify as Chicanos for the idea of like, okay, we are like, you know, Mexican Americans, emphasis on the Americans, and not necessarily in it for the political and organizational activism that is being done behind the name.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been my year thinking about it.
It's been a good year. I think you're right. I mean, we have to continue to critique the things that other people are saying and the things that we're saying and the politics. I mean, the minute that critique stops, growth stops, and then, you know, I think it then becomes what a lot of people try to make it out to be, right? It's something that's just stilted and, you know, trapped in the future. I mean, not in the future, in the past. And, you know, I mean, I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah, I mean, look at what is it, feminism and the waves, right? So
yeah.
I mean, so first wave, Chicanismo, right? But you know, you learn from all those things and the mistakes, and then the successes. So
yeah. Hey, let's listen. Go ahead. After you're done, Carolina, we'll listen to a little bit more.
Sounds good. I think the hardest part for me has been like trying to bring up these conversations, and me having grown up being kind of steeped in the Chicano identity, having these conversations with people who get immediately like argumentative and defensive, and then seeing that kind of translate to professors of Chicano studies and stuff, you know, and sometimes it's fair criticism, you know, like gotta critique professors, but also them, you know, being first, I mean, more likely than not being first generation college students than going on to being professors. And, you know, they have those same insecurities and hangups that students now do. And so it's such a hard conversation to have within collegiate settings, I think specifically within Chicano departments, Chicano studies departments, because everyone has this, like, it's not necessarily imposter syndrome, but, you know, no one's ever really given them the tools to have conversations to build on, especially because I think in like Latinx culture, like feeling or like critiquing older folks is very like looked down upon in all senses. So the struggle, it's hard.
Imposter syndrome is real. It's real. So yeah, that's a good point. Here, let's listen to a little bit more.
Real quick, Carolina. Any critique is valid if the critique itself has truth to it, regardless of who you're critiquing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's hard having these conversations because no one wants to be like, you're wrong. But also, I think for students especially, it's hard to have that language to articulate when, one, you know, you're not taught Chicano history and you kind of think that your experience is the experience of everyone.
Yeah.
And there's a way to say you're wrong, you know, or to explain you're wrong and why. And
I usually like to get right in their face and scream it.
Yeah, that works really well.
My favorite.
You're wrong. That's funny.
Right. That's only for chat forums and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. All caps. You're wrong. With lots of periods afterwards. I hear that.
No, exclamation marks.
Exclamation marks. Yeah. I hear that.
11-y.
That really upsets people. Yeah. All right. Here we go. There's a little bit more.
The year was 1921. The place, Perros Bravos, Nuevo León. Se me reventó el barzón y sigue la yunta andando. Estas tierras del patrón las siembro con un huaypando. Cuando llegué a media tierra, vino el lavar. Dio todo mi más se llevó, ni pa' comer me dejó. Te presento aquí la cuenta, aquí debes 20 pesos de la renta de unos güey, 5 pesos de maguey, otro peso en una coyuta, 5 pesos de unas tunas, otro peso en pantalón, 5 pesos de un calzón, otro peso no sé de qué, además de 20 reales que le debes a la hacienda. Ahora ponte a trabajar. Mira qué cabrón, este pelado ni calzones me dejó. Es verdad, viejito. Mejor vámonos allá al United States. Es verdad, viejita. Yo le dije a mi amada, mejor vámonos al United States, porque aquí en México las gallinas de arriba siempre se cagan en las de abajo.
I can remember watching him sing that part and just like how funny he made it. Yeah. United Status. That was always it was so much of it that I thought was funny. I'm sorry. Here, let me read a little bit more of this. This is after meeting and being inspired by playwright and director Luis Valdez, Negrete began his performance career leading a street theater troupe, Teatro del Barrio. He recruited aspiring Chicano actors, including his younger sisters Juanita, Santa, and Rosa, to travel the country, presenting satirical folkloric shows at schools, colleges, and other venues. He and Rosa later performed for a time as a music and multimedia duo, Flor y Canto. Crazy. I mean, he met Luis Valdez and went out on the road, right? Took his guitar and his harmonica and just, started performing in the streets.
Right, his tasseled shirt.
Yeah, his ribbon shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He it says that he held degrees from the University of Chicago, Illinois at Chicago, and Chicago State University. Negrete was an expert in multicultural education who taught in Chicago public schools and later in colleges and universities, including the University of Illinois at Chicago, Robert Morris University, Roosevelt University, and Indiana University Northwest. His specialties in educational anthropology and ethnomusicology led to research projects studying prostitutes in the Mexican-U.S. border economy. I actually remember that. Mexican railroad workers in Kansas City, Kansas, and at-risk Chicano youth in Chicago and elsewhere. Okay, y'all. So we're coming up on time. I'm really glad that we had a chance to have this discussion about Chuy, about cultural workers, and their importance to like our identity. I'm going to end with this piece that another excerpt from the tape Canciones de la Cesar Chavez. That's not right. I'll have to do that part over again. Para Cesar Chavez. Okay, now I got to start it over again. Sorry. One more time.
Take two.
In the factories, strikes were led by Mexicanos. The pecan shell strike of San Antonio, the mining strikes in Nuevo Mexico, Arizona, hundreds of agricultural strikes throughout the United States. Mexicanos, along with black workers and white workers, helped in the struggle for the 8-hour day. Among them, a woman by the name of Lucy Gonzalez Parsons, wife of Albert Parsons, who was hung in the Haymarket riots of 1886. Don't listen to the bosses, don't listen to their lies. We poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize. Ese día en la fundición, cuando empezó la huelga, ese día en la fundición. Dice a Lucy González, ese día en la fundición, que no se raje nadie, es mejor aguantar hambre. Pero era muy temprano en la lucha organizada. Muchos cruzaron el picket line. Don't listen to the bosses, don't listen to their lies. We poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize. Brown, red, black and white, all the workers must unite. Brown, red, black and white, all the workers must unite. Ese día en la fundición, ese día en la fundición, vino la represión. Y vino la represión, 15 muertos, 10 heridos, ese día en la fundición. Come join the CIO, come join the CIO, come join the CIO, come join the CIO. Dice a Lucy González, ese día en la fundición, que no se raje nadie, es mejor aguantar hambre.
This is the Reality Dysfunction.